There's no streaming live on Facebook. Oh, okay. I think Mario set it up. Yes.
Great.
Are we good?
Okay, y'all are good to go. Have fun.
Thank you, Mario. Welcome, everyone. I am Rosa Cabrera, Director of the UIC Rafael Cintrón Ortiz Latino Cultural Center, better known as the LCC. And thank you for joining us in the first Climates of Inequality online conversations. This is a series with local environmental and climate justice leaders. Our country, as you all know, is literally burning, right? And those exposed to the highest degree of burns continue to be Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Environmental racism is an old and disturbing story in this country that has created a bad situations where these communities live, work, play, and go about their daily lives, resulting in a current health crisis that is revealing how these communities are disproportionately at risk and of contracting and dying from the coronavirus. While environmental justice leaders clearly see how pollution, climate change, and the pandemic are intertwined, we need to broaden this understanding and commitment for a massive rise up to bring profound change. So the Climates of Inequality series will feature 7 online presentations this fall where guest speakers will be highlighting how frontline communities in the Chicago region who are impacted by environmental pollution and climate change, and more recently COVID-19, are demanding justice and putting forward a vision to create a healthier and safer communities. Today's presentation, led by Edith Tovar and Juliana Pino Alcaraz, will focus on LVEJO's La Villita Respira campaign in response to the Crawford Plant demolition and future construction of a distribution center by Hilco. But before we start the presentation, I would like to thank the Humanities Action Lab, where the Climates of Inequality Traveling Exhibition Project resides, and organizations Alianza Americas and Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, known as LVEJO, for partnering with the LCC to create a local story resisting cycles of environmental injustice in La Villita, which you can check out in the LCC website. I believe that the link to that exhibition has been shared on the chat. So please, when you get an opportunity, I encourage you to do that. I would also like to thank our co-sponsors for this month's series, which include the UIC Department of Anthropology, Latin American and Latino Studies Program, Latin American Recruitment and Educational Services, LALS, Museums and Exhibition Studies, and the School of Art and Art History. Today's presentation will be approximately about 30 minutes. This is the time when the presenters will share with us. And then we will follow with a short conversation facilitated by UIC students in my environmental and climate justice course. They are Giselle Alvarez, Lilian Mansfield, and Gabriel Powell. So now I would like to introduce our 2 guest speakers and share a bit of their backgrounds. Edith Tovar is the community organizer at LVEJO, focusing on just transition. Edith is a lifelong resident of La Villita community. As a first-generation college student and youngest of 4, she was the second in her family to graduate with a university degree. She obtained her Bachelor of Arts in Spanish and Economics with a minor in political science and her Master's in Urban Planning with a concentration in environmental planning and policy from UIC. Edith came to LVEJO from the Rafael Cintrón Ortiz Latino Cultural Center, where she developed public programs highlighting the intersection of arts, culture, social and environmental justice, while also overseeing the LCC internship program. And Juliana Pino is the policy director of LVEJO, born in Tuluá, Colombia, and raised in both Colombia and the United States. Juliana's personal life is transnational, and her background is interdisciplinary. At LVEJO, Juliana analyzes, researches, and advocates for environmental justice, climate justice, and economic justice in local, state, and federal environmental policy. Their campaigns cross many areas, including energy, food, water, air, land use, brownfields, taxes, transportation, workforce development, and others. Her work focuses on advancing energy democracy and community self-determination in regulatory and policy arenas, creating just transition with meaningful collaborative and participatory management of shared environmental resources and centering frontline community leaders as generators of transformative policy ideas and governance models. I don't know how we welcome online because we cannot applaud, but I guess I'm going to just do the applaud for everybody. Welcome to the LCC virtual community, Edith and Juliana. So you have the floor.
Wow, y'all, thank you so much for, can y'all hear me first of all? Sorry, I forgot to check in. Awesome. Yeah, so I would first off like to acknowledge, right, that some UIC community members are on strike. And so I just want to honor their work, honor the labor, honor the movement that they're building. So a huge shout out to SEIU Local 73 and the Illinois Nurses Association in their effort to get a fair contract, right? And it's just, I can't understand why they're on strike, right? When these are our health workers who are taking care of us, right? Taking care of a lot of our sick in Chicago. And so I just want to honor and have them, you know, take up some space before we start our presentation. Juliana, is there something you would like to share before I start sharing our presentation?
Thank you, Edith. I also want to include a land acknowledgement. Edith and I are both based in Chicago, and so is the University of Illinois at Chicago. And this is the historical land that was tended to and is the rightful space for the Council of Three Fires Nations. And I think it's important that when we're doing land-based resistance in Chicago, which all environmental justice work is connected to space, that we take time at the beginning of anything where we're acknowledging that, to recognize that we're in land that is belonging to and was stolen from Indigenous communities that are native to this area. And any work we do has to incorporate addressing that at the very beginning. So thank you for teeing us up, Edith. I'm really glad you noted the strike. I think in general, if we're going to achieve any sort of collective liberation, we have to be thinking about who's the most impacted by the issue areas that we're working on, and what are we doing to back them up as they note, hey, this is what is concerning us, these are the conditions that we're dealing with, and this is what justice looks like. So we're in complete solidarity with the strike and fully support.
Thank you, thank you. I am trying to figure out how to do my share screening. Where do I go? Is there should be like an option, right? Right in the beginning. Here we go. Got it. Share. Okay. Sorry, folks. I don't know why it's taking me a little bit longer. All right, let me see now. Y'all can see, right? Okay, cool. Oh. There we go. Yeah, thumbs up if you can see the screen. Okay, awesome. So thank you all again. I believe we're the first presenters for Climates of Inequality. So again, very grateful to be given the opportunity to share what the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization has been doing right these past 26 years since we were established in Little Village. And I just also wanted to give a quick shout out to William Estrada, who did this beautiful artwork right in the first slide. He's a professor at UIC School of Art and Architecture. No, school, I think that's where he is. Sorry if he's not there. There we go. And so I just wanted to start off with providing a little bit of history of LVEJO. Like I mentioned, we've been in LVEJO community here in Chicago for 26 years now. And this was an organization, like many local organizations, started with like grassroots movements. And they were started by parents, community residents concerned that their children were being exposed to toxins while one of the local schools was being remodeled, and that school was Gary Elementary. And so this was an effort led by, again, parents and residents that really started to take notice of a lot of the environmental injustices that were happening in the community. Not only were they seeing, right, this roofing that needed to be done in their school, and the tar and the toxins, right? You know, unfortunately, many of the children were you know, developed nausea. Parents were being told that some of their students were, or some of their children were passing out. And so this was obviously very alarming. And, you know, it unfortunately put the principal at that time in a very interesting predicament, right? Because the school was not being properly funded, and they got the best deal, right, in fixing the roof during the school year. And so these are very obvious, you know, inequality, injustices, inequalities that were happening 26 years ago in a Chicago public school, right? And so along with parents and residents, they were able to push that remodeling for the summer when the students aren't present, and we're able to take on other campaigns that they noticed, or other environmental injustices that they noticed across the community. And so I just wanted to share, right, that a lot of the accomplishments that LVEJO has led has been because we are continually having these conversations with our residents. And at times it's not even LVEJO, it's residents bringing their concerns to us, right, of diesel trucks coming down a residential area when they shouldn't be driving down residential area. And so we're really proud to be working with the residents, and overall, right, what we encompass is to trying to achieve self-determination. And I really want folks to kind of hold on to that word, self-determination, as it will be brought up throughout our presentation or our conversation that we're going to be having in the next hour or so. There we go. And Juliana, if you wanna.
Absolutely. Edith, thank you for that grounding. Out of all of those initial community conversation, the organizers at the time decided, in order to figure out, there are so many different issues, even under environment, that are impacting the neighborhood. We started with this issue area at the school, but we're hearing there's more. We are directly experiencing more. We should be talking with a wide swath of the neighborhood to figure out, what do folks want us to work on? So the reason I highlight this is because many organizations don't start from this place of our work should be defined by what the community scope is set as. And folks went door to door over years and determined ultimately that we would have several issue area spaces. One of them focused on open space. The community of Little Village even now has the lowest green space per capita of any neighborhood. And when you think about that, right, the neighborhood is 40% of the area that is considered South Lawndale, which Little Village is inside of, is industrial corridor land. And then there's also a number of industrial sites outside of that space. We have very, very few parks of any kind. So something that's really important as we look at the map of Little Village, very, very few parks in Little Village. Also, folks highlighted there are public transit concerns that families are dealing with. They also highlighted, hey, there's garbage that we're dealing with that we would like to manage. That's an environmental issue. We have air quality problems as a result of that. We have rats and other pests that are affecting the community. And so through these conversations, these issue areas were identified. And then over time, LVEJO worked on campaigns inside of these issue areas. And we wanted to highlight 3 main legacy campaigns. One of them is the open space campaign. This campaign focused on the issue of not having enough green spaces. In particular, it focused on a site called Celotex, which was a 23-acre site right behind Cook County Jail. If you look at the image on the slide, you can see the site in green because after 23 years of struggle, the community successfully got that site cleaned up, got it declared a Superfund site, which is a former industrial site that is so expensive to clean up that it requires a Superfund of money. Like, no joke, that's where the name of that program came from federally to deal with, and brought US EPA in to address the legacy contamination at the site. Now, the legacy there is really important to know because the city and the county envisioned that land and the community as land that shouldn't be cleaned up or needed to be cleaned up. There was no notice to community members about how dangerous that land was. We're talking extreme levels of toxic chemicals that folks were just like walking through, that was flowing into folks' yards when it rained, right? And part of how the organization became aware of it is that people were getting rashes on their legs and arms when they were baldeando, using buckets to get water out of their basements after heavy rainstorms when they're experiencing flooding. That's not normal, right? They're like, what's in this water? And so by investigating that and responding to that, it became clear that that was coming from runoff of that site. And then the community said, we want to use that site as a space of justice. We want that cleaned up. We also want our homes cleaned up. We want our yards tested. And the organization fought with US EPA alongside residents to say, hey, you all want to test only a handful of homes. We should be testing way more homes than this based on all of the places where people are having impacts. And indeed, in the testing, the worst impacts were actually furthest away from the park, from the future park area. Now, young people led a campaign for the makeup of this park to also be responsive to what the community's vision of this land would be. And that was a long struggle. The city had a different vision for that land. And we'll talk a little bit more about the wins associated with that in a minute. On the public transit campaign, the city had canceled the 31st Street bus line. Little Village is split in over a large, dense area. And folks didn't have a way to get east-west through the neighborhood once this line was canceled. So folks were having to walk through different gang territories, having to go pretty extensive distances, and really dealing with school and work transportation barriers once this bus line was just canceled arbitrarily because the city decided nobody's using it, right? Not nobody, the community is not nobody. They just didn't think that the line should be funded in the same way that it did. So then there was a long campaign launch to reinstate that bus line, and it's around now. The Clean Power campaign is one that you'll hear more about a little bit later in the presentation, but this one originated when it became clear, speaking with folks going door to door, that there are a lot of different people with extreme asthma challenges in the community, having difficulty breathing. Where is it coming from? Why is this such a pattern? Across different age groups and families, you had children, their parents, their grandparents, all having different kinds of breathing problems. And it took a lot of investigating and work with allies to figure out, oh, there's a coal plant in this community, and that coal plant is pumping out metric tons of air pollution every day that we're breathing. sitting very close to the plant are homes. And so that launched a 12-year campaign to address the source of that pollution in the Crawford Coal Power Plant struggle. That struggle, hint, hint, continues today. We'll hear more about that later. Edith, can we go to the next slide? So we also wanted to highlight, in addition to just giving a brief overview of our legacy campaigns, we wanted to highlight our approach. Some core pieces here to our approach have to do with community expertise. So you heard from Edith earlier about the idea of self-determination. This started with the legacy of our work being defined by community members. When folks said, we know the problems that we're dealing with and we know what we want to work on, that seed took root in the organization and has only grown. Self-determination is crucial in our work in that any organizing we do with the community is having decision-making power over what's happening. Community is giving substantive input into the pathways forward, and community is identifying both problems and solutions based on expertise. This is really important to know because often policymaking and organizing does not operate this way, where community is sort of tagged as a participant, but not a central actor, and whose experiences are not centered as the expert in the scenario. For us, we think about community expertise as what's folks' lived experience? What are people experiencing day to day? Like, we're not talking about folks having degrees. We're not talking about being able to identify with numbers or quantify their experiences necessarily, though folks can, and many folks do. We're talking about what does it mean to really listen to someone's narrative and to have that narrative respected and driving outcomes in the way that we do our work. In terms of community expertise, we also want to highlight youth expertise in particular. So young people have played a huge role in LVEJO's work over time. And this isn't just in terms of identifying problems, but this is also in terms of these are the kinds of solutions that we can bring to the neighborhood based on what we think is impacting us and what we want for our future. Youth have driven so many different parts of our process. And I think it's really important to center that because even though young people, grow older into adults, young people over time, when they were young at all these different important points in LVEJO's history were key drivers of all of the things that we can claim are victories or our major campaign wins. Young people were central and continue to be central in those pieces. And then I would say that in general, when we talk about work or goals that we are trying to achieve, overall, the path to justice, safety, wellness, and health is through the community's vision for what the future should be and what reality should be becoming real, as well as the community having direction over the use of resources. So a lot of what we deal with day to day in addressing or understanding these issues is seeing that communities have been deprived of decision-making power over how resources are leveraged in community areas and over what their futures or reality should look like. So winning or achieving outcomes that we want to see in environmental justice is contingent on disrupting that and putting the power back in the hands and back in the spirits of community members to be able to actually drive these outcomes in a way that is not being delivered by government or by other public institutions or by society at large. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you, Edith. One specific way that we think about that is thinking about just transition. So just transition is an approach under environmental justice that has to do with the space of energy specifically. For us, just transition means going from extractive energy to renewable energy. When we say extractive energy, we're talking about the dirty stuff. We're talking about stuff that comes out of the ground, gets burned, stuff that powers much of our electric grid right now, coal plants, gas plants. We're talking about fracking. We're talking about other kinds of mining. We're talking about nuclear, right? And transitioning that to renewable energy. So that would be cleaner types of generation. Not perfectly clean, because we have to also talk about extraction when it comes to renewable energy, but cleaner generation and securing workers' rights and livelihoods when the economy is shifting toward that sustainable production. So as we're addressing climate change, it's not enough to just say, let's just swap out coal with solar. We also have to think about who's working in that coal plant, who's going to be working at that solar plant, how are we delivering economic justice, whose bills are going to be affected, who's going to make savings out of this on their electric bills, how are we delivering that kind of economic justice, what kinds of rights will the community have over decision-making over these kinds of facilities in the future, right? Part of what happened with the coal industry or some of these historic fossil industries is, again, they're making decisions on behalf of the community. They're they're extracting from the community, and then they're not having to be accountable for it. If in a clean future, we don't change the decision-making structure, we're going to have the same problem, just with a different decider, right? The community is still not going to be in the sort of position of power to make decisions. In a just transition, the community's vision is enacted and the community has control over resources. For us, we included a few examples here when Edith and I were preparing this. We wanted to include some photos. So at what I mentioned, the Cellotech site, you have a photo here of folks playing in a portion of the park that replaced that site. This is the largest brownfield to park conversion in North America. And the design of the playground was coming from there being over 5,000 young people under the age of 5 within a couple of blocks of this park. That's a lot of young people. Little Village is a neighborhood area in South Lawndale, has some of the highest numbers of young people for a neighborhood in Chicago based on the population. So we're a super young neighborhood. So having play areas and recreation areas, whether it's a skate park or a playground, was huge in terms of what young people were fighting for. And so you see a photo of some of that there. Another example of just transition was converting a former brownfield into an amazing community garden, Semillas de Justicia Community Garden. The garden was filled with oil tanks from a former site that they just buried underground. And even when they were trying to clean it up, the former owner deliberately spilled those tanks open to like contaminate the land further to try and prevent the community from accessing justice. Now it's a thriving community garden. It supports 40 families to grow food and even run small businesses. And so that's another example. The decision-making about that garden, like we support it as LVEJO, but the gardeners are the ones making those decisions. So again, how is control shifting? In the last picture, we have the vision that the community produced over what the future of the retired coal plant could look like. We're still struggling toward this vision, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Edith. Could you go to the next slide, please? Now, in 2014, we secured a number of changes on these big campaigns. So after 12 years, the coal power plant shut down. After 23 years, the Cellotech site was cleaned up. After 23 years, we saw the opening of La Villita Park. After 12 years, Semillas de Justicia was cleaned up. In the short term for the organization, this was a moment of reflection, like what now? What do we do now? Are we done? We're good, right? Like we can go on permanent vacation, like we've solved the problem of environmental injustice, we can check this off and we're fine. But actually, as we can probably anticipate, that was just the beginning, right? The neighborhood was actually dealing with a number of other environmental injustices and injustices of other kinds. And so we shifted in our thinking from what now and we're done, right? To there's this legacy of toxins that still continues. And we got to address that. And I want to highlight this because LVEJO learned a lesson in asking different questions, not just what do we do to fight back against toxic outcomes, but also how did these situations become reality in the first place? There are these important questions of, this isn't just an accident, right? The reality that we live in is deliberately produced by a set of decision-making and decision makers. Who are they? How did it happen? How do we intervene so that this doesn't happen again? And that was a major shift in expanding our work and thinking about our organizing in a lot of different venues, connecting the power building on the ground to intervention at every scale to affect long-term change, not just in Little Village, but to band together in solidarity with other communities impacted by these issues to affect change in Chicago, in Illinois, in the country, even across continents. Okay, next slide, please, Edith. And I'm going to give the mic to Edith to talk a little bit more about the evolution of the Crawford campaign in particular.
Yeah, so this is where we made a connection of La Villita Respira, right? We have learned, right, from all these legacy toxins, right, of companies working, operating in a very dense community. And so in particular, when we're talking about the Crawford and Fisk generating stations, right, these were two of the most polluting coal plants, I would say, in the state of Illinois, in the country, operating in very dense communities, operating in a predominantly, you know, Mexican-American, Black community. And so we were sounding the alarms, and it really wasn't until Harvard School of Public Health, you know, teamed up with LVEJO and Perro, a community organization that is in neighboring community Pilsen, right? And they were able to come up, to do the research on how many folks were being impacted. And unfortunately, right, these numbers aren't great, and they hit heavy on the heart, because we have 40 premature deaths, 550 emergency room visits, and 2,800 asthma attacks per year. So this weighs heavy in the heart, and this, these numbers continue to propel us, right, to continue to do the work that we do in seeking environmental justice, because we saw, that it wasn't only Crawford and Fisk, right? We saw B-Way, right, which is another company that is operating right next to Little Village Lawndale High School, right? We're talking about Unilever, who is producing, hundreds of millions of pounds of mayonnaise, but the mayonnaise needs to be transported. So we have hundreds of diesel trucks zooming in and out of a residential area. And these are continuous legacies. And so unfortunately, our Clean Power campaign, still continues. We saw the victory in 2012, but in 2017, through a backdoor deal that was done with Hilco Redevelopment Partners and the former alderperson, Ricardo Munoz of the 22nd Ward, this deal was made where Hilco was able to purchase not only Crawford, but they also purchased Fisk Generating Station. And so this was something that really caught us, made us pause, definitely reevaluate what the meetings, community meetings that we had hosted, right, in previous years, because as Juliana mentioned, like there was this gap of reflection. There was this moment where we were able to host community meetings and really ask and engage with residents, right, and business owners of like, hey, what do we envision in the site? And for us and community residents to find out that, those visions are on hold right now and paused, to build a massive 1 million square foot logistics facility. And again, this is where we're hearing a lot of like, we transition from coal to diesel, and transition is not the best word, in our conversation, because it's just one toxin to another toxin that really hurts the public health of our residents, and particularly the children, folks that are expecting, elderly folks, right? Because we have particulate matter, the diesel exhaust releases particulate matter, and these are really fine particulates that really damage our respiratory system. And so this was very alarming for us to see that the future development of the Crawford site was going to be a logistics site. And so, through these last 2.5 years or so, we've been really engaging with residents to understand, what kind of, movement are we building here with our residents? And our residents have been very clear to us that they don't want to see a logistics site. We have we have hundreds of residential homes, only a few hundred feet away for where the Crawford coal plant is. And at the beginning, obviously, Hilco Redevelopment Partners hasn't been transparent as far as like the demolition, right? The hiring process. There has been no type of communication with residents as far as like, these are the things that we're going to do, or within the, with the organization. And so April 11th is a very difficult day for us to kind of reflect on, because we got a 24-hour notice email that an implosion of the smokestack was going to happen. And mind you, this happened on April 11th. This was probably a month into shelter-in-place orders from the city of Chicago. And so for us as an organization, as residents, right, we couldn't just wrap it around our heads and understand why the city of Chicago would allow a company, or why would the company do an implosion during a respiratory pandemic, right? We were starting to see the counts of COVID positive cases in our community increasing. We were starting to see, the unfortunate passings of many of our residents increasing. And so we just didn't understand why this smokestack needed to be imploded. And so I forgot to share trigger warnings. For us, this is triggering. This is an environmental disaster. This is environmental racism. And so, this were some of the images that resident Alejandro Reyes captured by drone. If he wasn't out there, right, doing these recordings, we probably wouldn't have seen the mass amount. So these were like images from a concerned resident. They took it upon themselves to record this. And for us, it wasn't surprising. This accident wasn't new for us. Like we knew and we expected this, because we did a call out to the city of Chicago. We reached out to the Chicago Department of Public Health. We reached out to Hilco to delay the implosion. And, unfortunately not successful. The implosion happened. And we saw almost a 6-block radius covered in this toxic dust. And again, this was a coal plant that was, operating for close to a century. And so we have this toxic dust covering hundreds of homes. And so our next response was obviously trying to figure out what was in this cloud of dust. And trying to work with the Chicago Department of Public Health, trying to work with Hilco. We unfortunately weren't as successful as trying to rush, right, for the city to collect dust samples. The city did collect dust samples. They collected them 4 days after the implosion happened. And for those who don't remember, I remember, this is like very, stuck in my head. It rained later on that day. So any evidence of like toxins, right, was compromised. And so the city of Chicago did do soil sampling, but we are still trying to push for that raw data information, because we want to further do analysis. And unfortunately, a lot of this soil sampling isn't available for us to do testing. And so, and I just wanted to be transparent and clear about this, about how these processes are done, right? And how community organizations literally have to push and push and push government agencies in this case to test what was going on. And I also, when we talk about the implosion, we also want to honor and acknowledge the passing of a community elder, Don Fernando Cantu, who was a 70-year-old grandfather homeowner who lived about 3 blocks away from the former Crawford Plant in Little Village. He had asthma, COPD, but his children say, that he lived a very active life. And the morning of April 11th, he stepped out after the implosion and the dust settled to tend to his garden. And, unfortunately, he passed away during the night. And it just weighs heavy on the heart again of knowing that a community elder passed, right, due to this implosion. And I also want to honor the artist who did this beautiful portrait of Fernando Cantu, who is Juliana. They did this beautiful portrait in honor of his memory. And so, we always carry Don Fernando Cantu close to our hearts. And so I also started to talk about, right, when the implosion happened, we started to see an increased number of COVID positive cases in Little Village. And Little Village, right, is divided, and South Lawndale is divided within different wards within different zip codes, right? And so the first graph that we see, right, highlights a study done by WBEZ that took highest death rates and highest case rates, lowest death rates comparison from the dates of March 9th through May 9th, right? And so this is the implosion happened right in the middle of when these cases were being done. And I want to highlight the 60623 zip code. This is predominantly Little Village, North Lawndale. Again, a predominantly Mexican-American community, Black community, reporting the highest cases rate, right? And the next graph, we see a cumulative burden of environmental exposures and pollutions. And this was done with NRDC and the Southeast Side Coalition to Ban PECOG and LVEJO. This was a study that showed, right, where pollution burden are particularly heavier in communities. And I wish, here, maybe I can do it with my cursor. This is the site right here. This is where Little Village is. And so if I could only like overlay it with the COVID-19 cases, right, we are seeing not only a high cumulative burden, right, of pollution, vulnerability, but we're also seeing highest cases of COVID in our community. And so when we're talking about environmental injustices, right, we also have to have these conversations of like, you know, people starting to say, well, they have, you know, they had conditions before. Well, yes, okay, they had conditions before, but, you know, their built environment also is as important, right, as the health that a person has. And so we're seeing in Little Village, right, in Pilsen, in Archer Heights, right, in North Lawndale, very high pollution vulnerability. And I added the links here, so I'll definitely make sure to share the presentation with you all so that y'all can really take a deeper look into these two graphs. But as COVID, right, was also in our minds, we also knew that we needed to be loud and we needed to be visible in our community. And so we have taken, we have done a few actions in the community, social distancing, right? We had this really powerful collaboration with many grassroots organizations across the city during Earth Day to May Day event or caravan action that we did on April 22nd of not only commemorating Earth Day, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, but also making that connection, right, of environmental justice and the labor movement that was leading on to May Day. So we had these caravan that connected us from Little Village. We traveled all through the industrial corridor, and we had we had Jose Acosta Cordova, who's also an organizer with us, lead us into kind of like a caravan tour per se. They were highlighting very important locations within our route, obviously noting Little Village Lawndale High School where we started off, going through the Hilco Crawford location, right, leading us to Cook County Jail that at the time was reporting the highest positive cases of COVID, right? We can't forget about our community residents that are in Cook County Jail. And so it was really important for us to also highlight that there is a movement, right, within Cook County Jail and outside to really highlight, right, the importance of public health within Cook County Jail. we traveled through also the Amazon warehouse or logistics facility by Western and 28th in support, right, of those workers who were, I believe, were on strike the week before or were on strike that same week. And so we traveled next to them to show our solidarity with them. We traveled to Pilsen and highlighted the Fisk generating station, the second location that that the Hilco Redevelopment Partners also purchased. We led folks to the downtown office headquarters of Hilco Redevelopment Partners, leading us to City Hall. And so we circled around that area just, to bring awareness, right, of that community residents, allies in Little Village and across neighborhoods. We're not going to take this environmental disaster, and we're still continuing to push. As far as other actions, we had an online petition where we gathered close to 19,524 signatures, which led folks to other actions, right? And so other actions that we supported and participated were artivism, right? I know that LCC has an artivism program where we really connect, right? The amazing, powerful tool of art, right? And bringing awareness to what is happening. And so I really want to also do a shout out for the People Artists Collective, for artists, amazing artists, these images for us so that it can be part of our digital campaigns. Folks were encouraged to share these images along with the link to our petition. And then we also had our other artist collectives. These images, and there's more images, were from Chicago Act Collective. And so very grateful to the Chicago artists, to artists in Little Village, artists across the neighboring neighborhoods, right? For really uplifting our message, right? Of Little Village deserves to breathe, la villita respira, and la lucha sigue. And I also wanted to add a little bit more of, not only are we focusing on Hilco, but we're also focusing on the company that signed a leasing contract, which is Target Corporations. I know many of us love to shop at Target, but just so that, a knowledgeable consumer, we have been, having these digital actions. We had one a few weeks ago where we use these images and tag Target, right? Of, these are, this is the environmental disaster that you're walking into if you continue your lease with Hilco. We try to empower as many folks as possible to share these images, to tag them, and most importantly, continue to use the hashtags. We have two that we're using a lot right now. Is Exchange 55, which is the name of the project at the Crawford site, and then obviously Fuera Hilco, Hell No Hilco. And these were opportunities, right, for us to continue to organize digitally, since we can't do a lot of the work that we usually do, like door knocking, like doing, participating in community fairs and festivals, right, and to share a lot of this information with us. So we are also not reinventing, but we're adapting to a lot of the different organizing skills. And for this one, for us, is digital actions, where we're able to collaborate with other organizations that can lead us and that can help us into kind of highlighting what is going on at the Crawford site. And so now I just wanted to, I'm going to invite Juliana to kind of lead us into what have we been doing for supporting our community impacted by COVID.
Hey folks, so often when we talk about our campaigns, we're really focusing on the oppositional work, and we thought it would also be helpful to paint a deeper picture of what environmental justice work in this moment means. And for us, a real keystone part of this work is the Farm Food Familias project, which is a collaboration with Getting Grown Collective, an organization based in Englewood who is doing really amazing things. The program was a direct response. It was a directed response to feed communities impacted most by COVID-19. And the base communities were Little Village and Englewood. It has expanded to South Shore. The program's moving into its 16th week. We started with 50 meals and now is distributing 300 meals every week. And they're also distributing produce. The program is really amazing, right? I want to shout out incredible organizers Taryn Randall and Vivi Moreno for co-leading this process and working with also local farms, for growing some of the produce themselves, for bringing on 4 different really incredible chefs who are preparing these meals every week. And so the whole program is really throwing down for Black and Brown families who are struggling hard in this moment to just basically make ends meet and to get fresh food. No matter what's going on, right? Our people continue to be impacted economically and health-wise by COVID. And then on top of that are dealing with environmental injustices of other kinds. And so this sort of intervention is super important because it's responding to needs as they emerge. So this is something that we've been doing this year, but really want to throw down. And I also want to shout out the incredible leadership from Getting Grown Collective. At the very beginning of the process, they secured the seed funds to cover some of this work. And the leadership of Black community organizers, they did an analysis and said, we want to focus the beginning of this work with Little Village neighbors and make sure that they're getting support because the neighborhood is getting hit so hard by COVID. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a really incredible example of solidarity from the Black community toward Little Village, which is majority non-Black Latinx populated, and now the program has evolved and folks are getting support across all neighborhoods. But even when Englewood brought in the initial money, Englewood showed up for Little Village in a way that I think is really important to shout out and to pay really big respect to. So again, shout out to Taryn Randall and Viviana Moreno and all of their incredible chefs working on this program. Next slide, please, Edith. We also have moved into expanding our water justice program to do emergency water distribution. So this brought bottled water to families dealing with water shutoffs or families who were living close to the Crawford plant whose water quality was impacted by the implosion. After the implosion, folks reported changes. The flavor changed, the smell changed. It's cloudy now. I don't know what's going on. You know, there were distinct changes to the water quality that shook lead pipes going into folks' homes, and it impacted water infrastructure negatively. Now the program is evolving into distribution of filter materials so families can sustain water access over time. And we've pushed the city to provide water quality testing for free for these households reporting changes. So what was really important is folks needed to know what was in their water. And even though the city didn't have an official testing program to address the specific kinds of issues that folks were dealing with, we organized to push the city to provide those tests and to make sure that the testing was available. And folks who were primarily speaking Spanish would still be able to understand the process and understand the information and have as much say in the process of working with the city to get that testing as families who are able to engage with the city in English. So this was an important intervention, but also this is work we shouldn't have to be doing, y'all. The city should be able to provide free and accessible clean water. And while we are in a scenario where we have to charge for water, that water should be extremely affordable. And right now it is not. And people had been in the past shut off for their inability to pay their water bills. So this was an important intervention to realize under COVID, not having water becomes a doubly difficult public health issue. Not having water in general is incredibly, incredibly damaging. And folks have found all sorts of creative and beautiful and necessary ways to get around that. Under COVID, a lot of those survival strategies were undermined because folks weren't able to do things like share hoses, go over to each other's homes to connect their water together, and do things that, you know, were unofficial or even things that the city could charge you fines for doing. But that's how folks were navigating. And so in this moment, this became a really important response, not just to that issue of not being solved, where the organization had pushed and actually had successfully gotten the administration to stop shutting off people's water, they never dealt with all the homes that had been shut off by Mayor Emanuel in the previous administration. So that's also many, many people who were still without water. And that's a huge problem. Next slide, please, Edith. Go ahead. I'm going to give the mic back to Edith to describe this part of our work.
Yeah, and we also wanted to highlight, you know, we had, I would say, a very tough beginning in the summer, right, where we saw a lot of anti-Blackness in Little Village and across the city. And so for us, it was really important to share how we've been supporting community impacted by anti-Blackness. And so first, you know, there is a link of a statement of solidarity with Black communities that LVEJO made, you know, as we saw folks grieving and uprising, right, for the lost lives of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McGade, and the list, unfortunately, can continue. But it was really important for us to, as a community, right, as Juliana mentioned, you know, non-Black POC, to show up and to really, really be outspoken against white supremacy and white supremacy. I would want to say like actions, right? So a few things that LVEJO participated in, you know, we provided rideshare programs, especially during the first few weeks, where we saw Black youth, right, doing a lot of leading movements across the city. And so when we saw that folks needed jail support, we were able to provide rides for folks to be able to get out of a situation, right? For example, when the bridges in downtown were raised, we were able to provide rides for folks trying to get out of downtown. We were also able to provide rides for folks trying to get to Cook County Jail for jail support, or police districts, right, when we were trying to get folks out of those situations. The next, you know, few things that we also participated on is that we were part of the Black Brown Unity March in La Villita. That was really important for us to participate and for us to show up as well. And lastly, Black to the Future, which was an event that happened almost a month ago. And I hold this event close to my heart because I was able to really build with a lot of organizers across the city, a lot of Black organizers across the city. And it was a beautiful moment of solidarity as well, because one of the actions that took place is that we did an art installation right in front of the Hilco Redevelopment Partners downtown headquarters location. And so a lot of folks, it was part of also a caravan, right? And calling to the mayor and city council to fund Black communities, right? Defund the police, fund Black communities. And for us, it was just really important for us to be there, to show up, and to share, right, of that environmental justice is, you know, affecting our Black communities. And so, you know, that's why we're there, and that's why we're showing up, and, you know, we're taking, you know, instructions from folks who are leading, right? And that's where we're at. And so it's just really important for us to share that with folks, you know, of the ongoing work that we have been doing. Juliana, I don't know if you want to add anything else to this slide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I would say is that these are struggles that folks have been leading on for centuries, and we're in a current moment of unprecedented reckoning based on really incredible organizing, especially by young Black leaders across the city. And it's really critical for anyone who is trying to work for social justice in society at all to take leadership from, to pay attention to ask yourself, how am I holding myself accountable as somebody who has lighter skin privilege? If you are or aren't a Black person, if you are a person who identifies as somebody who's a person of color, how are you also working in your community? If you are a non-Black person of color, to hold your community to transformation and to be doing this work for us. This is also about doing internal work as an organization and to ensure that we are really showing up. And this work is not work that is overnight or that it ends, but it really requires work in all of these different areas. And I would also say that there's incredible throwdown still going on in the city by Black-led organizations and formations. I want to shout out the Black Abolitionist Network, for example, who's really throwing down on defunding CPD, the Defund CPD campaign. Follow that hashtag, follow ban on social media. I also want to shout out the young people putting out Cops Out CPS, trying to get the cops contract with the CPS school system defunded, and also to get cops out, physically out of school locations across the city. Both really, really important initiatives. Right now, we're in the middle of budget season for the city. So these decisions, at least for the year, are coming up quick. And it's important to follow what's happening with decision makers. What are they deciding for communities? Are they responding to demands from the ground about what Black communities actually need for safety, which looks like taking money away from policing and putting money toward the kinds of community-driven, community-controlled resources that would deliver justice, wellness, wholeness, and the kinds of future folks are fighting for. So definitely keep up with that work and follow along. Chicago is one of the only major large cities that hasn't in some way from the top committed to any sort of defunding. Any of the wins, those that have happened with reducing the size of the contract or getting, cops out of schools or any other transformation is strictly because of the organizing on the ground. And we're not seeing responsiveness from the Lightfoot administration on these issues. So keep up the pressure and participate in throwing down for communities as they're saying, this is what we need, I think is a sort of public call to action that we definitely want to emphasize in this moment.
Yeah. And so we're coming up to the end of our presentation. I just also wanted to share possible actions or support that folks can participate on. And so if you're driving or walking on 33rd in South Pulaski, there are 2 new billboards that lead folks to an action page to send an email to City of Chicago officials, Hilco and Target Corp, that Little Village deserves the just transition that we fought for. And I'm so sorry, I was going to add the link to a recent article piece by a colleague of ours, Jose Acosta, who shared more historical context, right? And our vision of a just transition on a Southside Weekly article that was just published today. So I'll make sure to add the link to the slide before I share with folks this slide. And so I really hope that folks are able to submit and participate through the Sierra Club link. I also wanted to give a shout out to Sierra Club Illinois for helping us with these billboard campaigns. And that's it, folks. Please let us know if there's like any questions. I'm going to go back to our group here. Should I end the share screen? Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation, Edith and Juliana. I think we're going to go on overtime here if some people want to stick around for maybe another 10 minutes or so. So that I think we have Gabrielle and Lillian here, and they might have a couple of questions for the 2 of you. So I know that, the folks who are live streaming this might want to stick around for another 10 minutes or so. That would be great. Yeah, so I think it's all yours, Gabriel and Lillian. If you have any questions or any comments or for Edith and Juliana.
Yeah, so going back to a just transition, what kind of issues do you face when you're kind of going through that just transition, and how do you combat those challenges?
Edith, I can give the first answer and then send it to you. I think there are a few things. I think I'll keep it short and say there's issues of the lack of belief that communities have the expertise to create the future that they deserve. So there are governance barriers and expertise barriers. Folks think we need engineers to determine this. We need scientists. We need other kinds of politicians to set this future, and don't trust that the community has the expertise to do it themselves. Also, if you hear my cat El Gato Rebelde in the background, he's just yelling because he's in full agreement. Facebook, that's my cat. And I think another thing is that when the community wants to set its own vision, often we're thinking about integrating, again, economic justice with environmental justice. A lot of times folks have a limited vision outside of the community and they say, well, we either get the jobs or we get the clean environment. We either get, the type of businesses that would employ the kinds of people that you are, right? There are these racial undertones, or we get a park and we get to design it. There are these very limited ways of thinking and a lack of creativity to actually achieve the outcomes that communities want that integrate all of these different consequences together. And I think that that's another barrier. The last thing I would say is shout out campaign finance reform, because the oil, gas, and other fossil industries, coal, transportation, big transportation, all of these folks have a lot of access to political decision making and are able to really lobby for the outcomes that they want. So the community is always in a position of having to intervene at every jurisdiction to try and exert what they want their own future to be, and to circumvent processes like we saw with the Crawford plant, where Hilco was able to come in, behind closed doors, buy the plant up, and determine what they thought should happen in the community, right? The community didn't even know what was happening until after the fact. So that's another big barrier. And then I'll pass it to Edith. And also, folks, I apologize. I will have to turn my video off momentarily.
Yeah, I want to follow up with what Juliana mentioned about economic justice. That has been something that Hilco was able to leverage when they first came to the Little Village community. And even in the first community meeting that they held in August of 2018, they came in with like the savior complex of like, we're going to demolish this coal plant that caused just so much harm, right? And I always liked sharing this story because it really showed what kind of power our community has. There was a resident, Pastor Vic, who passed away a few years ago. He was a very well-known community resident that worked with young people. And he shared, I remember him, plain and simple, he stared at the CEO, who's Roberto Perez of Hilco Redevelopment Partners, and he said, yeah, we do want this building to stay up, because it reminds our community of the victory, that we held in shutting down this Crawford coal plant. It might have taken X amount of years, right? But we did it. And so I really want, hopefully that story sticks with people, because just because a developer, right, comes into a community and promises the community X amount of jobs doesn't mean that that's the actual number. And also being critical of the types of jobs that they are going to be bringing into the community, right? Logistics facility, 1 million square foot building that would only really employ less than 200 permanent jobs isn't economic justice, isn't uplifting the community and uplifting the residents that live, and work and play in the community. So for us, it's been, trying to make that connection of having of being able to get more, right, of what is being offered or what is being painted by these developers that, obviously have their own plans and their own sketches and their own ideas without really involving the community that they're going to be a part of.
And thank you so much for being present. This is Gabrielle, and I just wanted to to just highlight, I'm also alumna from UIC, and that this is a partnership, a relationship with the university and LVEJO and the community. So I was curious of what your vision is for the next generation of not only community members with expertise, but now we actually have credentialed, like many credentialed people of color that are remaining in their home communities and are available to do, let's say, toxicology research or to be independent or researchers to support our plans, as well as urban planners and so I'm just a little curious of what your visions are for these new generations, and we can sort of help. Sorry, audio might be bad. How we can help to support other communities who have, who are facing things like Hilco, because in New Jersey to another plant. So, we have lots of lessons to learn and playbooks to write to support community organized with this new level of expertise at a different credentialed level in our communities. So I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Something that came up right away was this vision, right, of not only across city collaboration, but right now we're doing across country collaborations, right? I really want to also uplift Philly Thrive, who is a grassroots organization in Philadelphia, who unfortunately are also dealing with Hilco redevelopment partners. They are trying to get a second round of tax breaks that will indirectly, defund the school district in that city. So for me, what I envision, right, is that obviously this continuation of collaboration. Personally, I loved being part, right, when I was at the LCC, being part of this project at the beginning, and then now being able to continue this collaboration in this specific project. And so I would love to continue to expand LVEJO's support in any way for other organizations across the country that are unfortunately dealing with Hilco. Definitely share, right, lessons learned, hopefully strategies, right, that for other organizations to really know, and for residents in particular, right, to know that just because this is like a gigantic multi-billion-dollar corporation doesn't mean that you can pause on their development or really just drag along the development that they're trying to complete. I would say that, I don't know, Juliana, if you would like to add anything else.
Hey folks, thank you so much for that, Edith. I actually think that was a great answer. And I also wanted to say, unfortunately, that I have to head out, but I really appreciate this conversation, y'all. Really great questions. And thank you so much for listening in. For those on Facebook, we really appreciate it. And definitely look back at the calls to action for ways to support. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Elena.
I have a question here from Giselle. She asked, what did the process of converting a former brownfield into a thriving community garden look like? And she said, I asked because I know Acme Steel has been closed since 2001 and hasn't been cleaned up.
Yeah, so looking back, obviously this was, and looking back to the chart in the presentation, right? Many of our campaigns, right, were 10 plus year campaigns. So one, continuing to push forward, obviously continuing to uplift the vision that community residents have. I know for Semillas de Justicia, and even during the presentation, right, Juliana mentioned that the owner purposely, right, further contaminated the land, and for residents to continue to push forward, especially the 40 families that are currently at Semillas de Justicia, right? They're growing their own produce. They are sharing a lot of the produce that they grow, right? And for us, we definitely see working the land as part of self-care, as self-preservation. So let me know if I'm answering your question, because I feel like I can get lost in just talking about Semillas de Justicia, because it's just like such a beautiful space that, yes, you're right, it took too long to establish, but I think Semillas de Justicia, I believe, turned 6 this year. So it's somewhat fairly new to the community, right? But it's definitely a thriving location that residents can definitely go to recreate in a way. I know that at the site that you mentioned, right, it's been closed, I believe you said since 2001 or 2001. Yeah. So it really takes community residents to continue to push forward, to continue to uplift their visions of what they see or what they want on that site. And so, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. That was a great answer.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much again, Iras and Juliana. I just want to go back to the statement that I made at the beginning in the introduction, putting forward, this need to broaden our understanding and commitment for a massive rise up, right? To bring profound change. And what I mean by that is, how do we, continue to understand in more depth how intertwined the, environmental pollution, climate change, and the pandemic is, and what is yet to come. But also, all these incredible solutions that are happening at the community level, and how we, all of us can give you support and be in solidarity for all these things to happen. So I think that definitely, you were the first of the series, and you have given us a lot of depth, important information for all of us to, continue to build our toolkit, right, to understand all these issues and be able to take action. So I would like to thank again the two of you and the 3 students in my class, Giselle, Lillian, and Gabriel, and also the LCC staff who is behind the scene, sort of like doing all the logistics with the online presentation, and obviously all the people who graciously join us live streaming the presentation. So thank you again all, and take care.